Yeah, so this course is economics of organization, is very much dependent on the game theory course. Okay, so in other words, this is an applied game theory course, like many other courses that you will have in the department. Okay, and as the name suggests, that this will be talking about different kinds of organizations. Okay, now what we mean by organizations? We mean by organizations all sorts of things. Okay, so even that includes the terrorist organizations. Okay, so everything that you can think of, all possible organizations, and all organizations have certain kind of constraints. They have certain policies, certain ideology. So I mean, ideology means objective function. Okay, so many things are involved with an organization. Okay, so this course is slightly a kind of extended version of theory of firm course, which I was used to teach earlier. And some of the topics will be similar with that course, but some of the other topics will be new. Okay, so in other words, your firm is essentially an organization which is well studied, and the lots of literature exists on the theory of firm, and firm is the classic example of an organization. Okay, now other form of organizations that we also observe in reality, and we do see their behavior, they sometimes do conform with the standard firm type of organization, but sometimes they might have very different kind of orientations and operations and objective and the way of doing things. Okay, so when we say organization, it is essentially a collection of some economic agents which are forming the organization. Okay, so we are not studying any individual behavior here. We are studying an organizations with many types of economic agents and how they organize certain activities, certain operations with certain objectives. Okay, and certain decision-making structure. So everything will be studied under this course. Okay, how far we will be able to do it is, of course, subject to many constraints. I will tell you as I go along. So if you just look at the first diagram, so this is more or less the structure of any organization. Now, what are those organizations? Any organization that you can think of, there will be some interactions with outside organizations, and there will be certain things which will be happening inside the organization. Okay, so if you look at the left-hand side entries, they are telling you that between organizations, how your organization or a particular organization is interacting and forming that particular organization. So vertical integration. So vertical integration essentially tells you that how far in the organization you want to integrate vertically. Now think of any activity of any organization is a sequence of events. Okay, sequence of activities. And then how far of all these activities you want to keep it within the organization, or how far you want to interact with other parties. So that will define that how far you would like to vertically integrate in this sequence of activities. Okay, so in other words, when you look at the firm as an organization, firm obviously doesn't do everything. It buys certain things from the market and also decides what to produce inside. Okay, so in other words, when it decides something to buy from the market, so it decides how much it actually integrate in the vertical ladder. Okay, similarly, some firms can have exclusive showrooms, okay, in terms of sales activities and all, but some firms may not have that, and they can simply simply contract it out to other agencies or other parties, which will be undertaking those other activities in the vertical chain. Okay, and this is more or less the idea of vertical integration, and supply chain is essentially part of this particular structure. Similarly, any organization will also have some orientations about the horizontal integration. Now, when we say horizontal integration, means that it essentially decides how much horizontally it integrates. That means how many products it produces and what are the activities it undertakes within the organizations. So it, after forming the organizations in the supply chains, it decides what are the things to do within. Okay, and similarly, so this horizontal integration means that, say, suppose you have a portfolio of goods that can be produced, but you decide how many goods you want to produce. Okay, similarly, conglomerate is another idea, that it is not only the organizations for producing, say, good X, but you can also think of that producing good A, Y is also part of your organization. So that way, the business organization that you are thinking is becoming a conglomerate with many, many activities under the same umbrella. Okay. Now, with other organizations, contracts is an essential element, and these contracts are typically could be formal contracts, which are legally binding, okay, and enforceable by the court of law. On the other hand, there can be relational contracts. Those relational contracts are not as such formal, but that depends on the relations that you maintain in the long run with any particular supplier or any set of other organizations with which you do the exchanges and trades. So these are kind of relational contracts that are there. Okay. There are hybrid forms of organizations. So for example, sometimes a business organization, they try to form alliance, they form networks, they form joint venture with other organizations. So all these things are essentially with respect to other organization, how a particular organization undertakes activity. On the other hand, when we go to the internal organizations of any organization, you see the following processes are involved. So the decision making. So when you have many people in the organization, obviously there will be power, there will be politics within the organizations, okay? Who will take decisions, how they will take decisions, okay? The interrelations with other economic agents, which are also part of your organizations. The power and politics will play an extremely important role. Similarly, the culture and leadership, okay? So whether the culture is more open and more cooperative in nature, or it could be less cooperative and less trust in the society. So that is another form of culture. And other kind of cultural aspects could be, there are potential stigma with respect to certain things and all that. Similarly, the leadership issues. So the leadership, who will take the decisions within the organization, okay? And when some people are taking the lead, others have to follow, whether they have that kind of how to basically work within the organization, and the issue of leadership is extremely important. Whether someone should be assigned the role of a leader or not, all these things will be part of the internal organization aspect. And why those things are important, we will gradually see answer to some of these questions, but given the limited scope of this particular course, we may not be able to do much. Similarly, employment, pay for performance is an important aspect of an incentive scheme. Okay, so the similarly skill development and what kind of HR practices that you undertake within the organization. So all these things are extremely important for the internal organizations of the firm or of any organization. Okay. Structure and processes, under that you have hierarchy, alternative forms. So whether you want to have a flat organization, okay, where basically everybody can report to the same person, or the organization is not hierarchical in nature. On the other hand, there can be hierarchical organizations where people basically, it's a pyramidal structure. So the lower level will be informing, reporting to the higher level, and then this process will continue until the top boss who is sitting at the top. Okay. Now, resource allocation. So when within the internal organization, so how different resources are allocated, okay, with respect to different division of the organization, and which divisions should be pampered or should be given more importance to under any situation, will have to be also decided and thought about. Transfer pricing is another issue. So essentially, when you have many organizations under your umbrella, and imagine that a multinational corporation which has operations in many different countries. Okay, now transfer pricing is a kind of pricing mechanism which talks about that when we have such an organization where one part of the organization is dependent on the other part for some of the supplies, okay, in the supply chain. So then the pricing has to be done. Now, you might be aware that in many of these foreign investment related issues, sometimes these multinational companies are involved with transfer pricing in a manner that they try to shift all the profits to the what is known as the tax haven. So essentially, they buy stuff from those entities situated at the tax haven and try to jack up the price, thereby increase the profit of that particular division, and by lowering the profit of the division of the other places. Okay, so this transfer pricing. So all these things comes under the internal organization of firms. Now, beyond firms, so this is some extraneous agencies under which the firms operate. So for example, states, so the law and order of the country, and what are the other agencies that are working in that kind of business environment. Okay, and also there can be some norms, culture, and some order in the society which are not directly related to the organization, but organization has to give importance to those things when it operates. Okay, so these are more or less how a particular firm or an organization can be seen in terms of that they have a dual role of interacting with the outside agencies, where basically those agencies could be different other organizations. Similarly, they have to manage things internally with very different economic agents which are part of these organizations, but they have to be suitably organized to have the greater value for the organization. Okay. So what are the links with other economics courses or economic fields? So essentially, this particular economics of organizations had some relation with trade and development, and the obvious link is that nowadays you often come across the idea of global value chain, so where basically the trade happens where by taking inputs and procuring inputs from many different countries in the process of a network. And if you have been present in Paul Anthas's lecture in the last winter school, he gave a detailed outline of how the global production is nowadays organized across the globe. Okay, for any company or for any particular product, whether it is a smartphone or a car or whatever. Okay, so this economics of organizations this course has some link with this. Similarly, corporate finance is another course which is not being taught as such in the department, but if you are somewhere in your further study, you will find that that particular course has a very strong link with this economics of organizations, because we'll be talking about much of the governance issues within the organizations which are directly comparable to the firm's governance, and that's part of the corporate governance course. Okay. And similarly, the organizations also needs finance. So organizations do interact with the financial market, and in such context, all the theories of corporate finance becomes relevant. Okay. Similarly, labor economics, so how the organizations interacts with the labor market, and then political economy, which actually determines the structure of the policies of the government, or the business environment that is dictated by the political decisions. So it has some link with that. And also, if you look at how the different political parties are organized, how they contest elections, everything, they are also, the political parties are nothing but organizations. When they compete with other political parties, these are essentially the interactions between organizations. Okay, all these competitions and everything. Okay. So the ideological bias and everything, that's also part of these political parties, whether how to locate themselves in the overall spectrum of ideology, or for that matter in the voters platform in terms of the voters preferences. So all this comes under the some kind of issues which are related to that with this study in organizational economics, that all these political parties, their interactions with other political parties, their mobilizations of the vote and everything are all closely related to some of the organizational economics that we will be learning. Law and economics is essentially very important, because organizations are built on contracts, and contracts, whether they will be kind of obliged by different parties. Okay, whether there is a court system which enforce all the contracts that are written between the parties. Okay, so all these things are is an essential component of the organizations and its functioning, and so it has very close link with the law and economics kind of course as well. Okay. And then there is this vacuum, nothing is written. Okay, so here comes your standard industrial organization, your economic theory of firm, your topics in industrial organizations, other kind of courses that you might have. So they are coming in this empty box. Okay, so any kind of IO related courses, industrial organization related courses are essentially also having overlap with organizational economics. Okay, so in this semester you have another course in industrial organization. So this course and that course will be complementary in nature. So that course will be mainly looking at the interactions across between organizations. So all these firm behavior, which will be strategic interactions with other firms, competitions, oligopoly. So all these things will be under IO, and that would be essentially in this framework that we are studying is the interrelation between the organizations. Okay, so that's a complementary course which is on offer in this current semester. Okay, and it has also links with economic sociology, social psychology, political economy, and some others. Okay, so already political economy is mentioned, and so these are all interlinked. Now note one important thing: what is an organization? Okay, where whatever you are doing, whatever exchanges that are taking place in the world, okay, all are under some kind of aegis of some organizations. All these things are happening. Okay, so you are studying in Delhi school, it's an organization. Delhi University is an organization. Okay, and what is organization? It's the collection of economic agents. And when you have to deal with collection of so many economic agents, you can understand the complexities of management for this kind of organizations, both internally as well as with respect to other organizations. Okay, so that's the idea of organization. Okay, So is the structure or any, is clear to in your mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So another important deviation that you will be making from the mainstream, most of the courses that you have learned so far. Now imagine that you have done theory of farm, okay? Now, when I say theory of farm, not in the course because that's not on offer, but I'm saying that in micro you have studied farm theory, right? Consumer theory, production theory, then perfect competition, okay, all these things, okay? So now if someone asks you that, how do you actually decide on something, and that suppose that person is a CEO of a big company, okay? That how do you organize production, or how much should I produce this particular commodity? Now, your immediate answer, I know, as a student of economics will be, you will ask what is the market structure, okay? Now, suppose that guy says that, yeah, the market structure is very competitive. Then your immediate answer will be, okay, then you set your P equal to MC. Now that guy will have an heart attack because the MC will never be understood in a factory. Okay. And then if you say that marginal cost, you don't know, it is DC DQ, then it will be the complete death of that person. Okay. So you can imagine that how removed some of the theories are from the reality, and reality is much more different and very difficult to manage. Okay. So I am not giving you any hope that we will be able to go close to reality, but we will be able to touch upon some of the aspects which are somewhat more realistic than the standard way that you have looked into the decision-making process for a firm or an organization so far. Okay. So, and your limitations of those knowledge is that in standard format that you are actually either choosing price or quantity, or you are looking at the market structure, making some investment to increase your capacity or lowering your cost in terms of R&D and innovations. So all these things are very standard way of looking at organizations. But when you look at organization with its complexities, and as the aggregation of different types of agents within any organization, so then you will realize that things are quite difficult to manage, okay, and to organize, okay. So just to give you a very basic example, imagine that what is the best way. In fact, let me just tell you. Okay, no. So those are bad examples. I should not start off with those. Imagine that in an organization, I'm trying to give you some kind of incentive, and incentive is based on that, on your performance. Okay. So suppose pay for performance is my incentive scheme. Okay. Now, when I have this kind of things in an organization, first and foremost, imagine that your performance is not only dependent on how much hard work you are putting in, but also how much all the other complementary workers that they are helping you in a variety of form are also putting in. So for anybody, it would be for any manager who is trying to assign some pay for performance to you, will have tremendous difficulty in terms of actually determining your performance in that kind of collective setup. Okay. So that's number one problem. Second problem is, suppose by some means I'm able to determine that you are a brilliant chap and maybe all the game theory midterms you have solved and most of the other people have copied it. Okay. And I decide that I give you very, very high reward for that. Okay. And somehow I have the ability to understand that. Maybe I talk to you and in one-to-one situation, and thereby I'm able to gauge your ability, and that's how I give you very high marks. Okay. And then not high marks, give you some reward. Okay. And then the problem is when I do this kind of things in an organizational setting, and immediately there can be reactions among the other people that one person is given the reward for the managerial, whatever the manager's ability to determine that this guy is very productive, but that might have some negative impact on the other people who are actually trying to help you to reach you that productivity level. Okay, so this might create a negative effect on the other people. So the pay for performance, okay, when the performance are very difficult to determine, then just whimsically giving you some kind of reward might have very negative effect. Okay. On the other hand, if suppose the performance are some way possible to determine easily, then one way to determine your performance is to create a situation of tournament. So essentially, I can give you some puzzle to solve in a small span of time. Okay, and then in that kind of tournament setting, I'm not saying puzzle. It came to my mind the game theory exam, but imagine in an organization that the tasks are assigned in a manner that it is possible to determine the individual's ability by how quickly you are performing those tasks and thereby demonstrating your ability. Okay, so in such a context, that situation of tournament, that how quickly some people are doing the task, how better they are, and then taking up the scheme of reward based on that performance might be a good idea. So I have given you both kind of possibilities that depending on the situation, pay for performance can actually act very nicely when you are able to determine the performance very clearly. But on the other hand, it might act very badly if your performance is dependent on many other people's performance, and you getting very high salary might actually be quite demoralizing to the others, because they feel deprived that they also have contributed, but their efforts are not acknowledged. Okay, so you can understand that these things are quite complex. Okay, and we will be able to look some of it, but obviously this particular course. Okay, let me just tell you what this course is. So this diagram I have actually copied from somewhere, and I'm telling you the background of this. So this is a course which is a PhD level course, but no exam. But here I have to take exam, so you can understand the difficulty. So I have to pitch at that level. This is a PhD level course jointly run by Harvard and MIT by Gibbons. Okay, and you know that Gibbons is kind of almost like with me all the time. So this is a Gibbons course, and this is jointly run for the PhD students of both Harvard and MIT. This is a seminar kind of course. Okay, students are encouraged to ask questions, and also they are supposed to write seminar paper. Okay, after doing this course, and make presentation. Okay, so that's typically the thing. So as a result, this course not only is a very vibrant research area and active research area, but it is also very complex in the sense that there does not exist any textbook. So it's an active research area. Many people are working there. The papers are being published, but we are yet to have a very good quality textbook where things can be like the IO textbook of Odsai or, for example, Tirol. Okay. So that kind of textbook is missing for this course. So we will be actually doing some of the papers, but as you can understand that when you are not being examined, the kind of papers that can be easily covered is very different from when I need to set up an exam paper, okay, for the course. Okay, so that means that not only the papers are to be presentable in the class, in a sense that they should not be too complex in nature, otherwise it will lose the spirit. And secondly, I have to set question paper, and in this current scenario, it has to be open book question paper, so you can understand the difficulty level for the instructor as well. Okay, so I cannot really give you a direct questions where you can simply copy from the material that are publicly available. Okay, so this is the background of this course, and so this particular diagram I have taken from Gibbons. You go to they call it organizational economics course. Okay, and in our this school it is in economics of organizations. It's the same thing. Okay, and there you will find many teaching material available online. Okay, so this particular diagram is also available there. Okay, and there will be plenty of other materials available. Okay, and this course is also being run by other two person. One is Daniel Baron and other person is Michael Powell. Okay, they are in the process of writing a textbook. So lectures in organizational economics. I think that book is also downloadable right now, because that's not yet a book. It is a manuscript in the making, okay, of a book. So they are yet to fully publish it, and once that is published, it may not be available online. So what did I say? Michael Powell and Daniel Baron. Okay, so these two authors, they have kind of organized lectures in organizational economics. So some of the topics can be covered from there. Okay, but again, that book is not yet fully published, and they are also continuously revising it. But they have more or less come to a kind of form of with plenty of chapters in it, and now very close to a textbook in a year or so. Okay, so this is the background, and that's how the context will be placed. Now, what are the questions that we will be asking in this? And again, these questions are available in Gibbons' own web page. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, there is another book which is Gibbons and Roberts. Okay, 2013. This is Handbook of Organizational Economics. But that's not a textbook. That's a collection of articles. So it's an edited volume with collection of articles. Again, you realize that those articles, when you are a research student, it's extremely useful and important for you to read, because you will be only writing a thesis based on one of the article only, okay, in that area, because all the topics are essentially an area by itself. Okay, so they are lengthy articles, but again, that's not a textbook, but that's a collection of some articles in the organizational economics. So 2013, Gibbons and Roberts, Handbook of Organizational Economics. And this set of questions, I have again taken it from Gibbons' own homepage. So there, I think he has put up something, or maybe from online, just write 24 questions of organizational economics. You will find this Gibbons, a small 2-page summary of those questions. Okay, so let me just go through these questions one after another, and we will be addressing some of the questions, not all. Okay, but it is good to be aware of the questions that are important, and these questions are not solely relevant to this economics of organization course. These questions are relevant for anything, any economic environment that you are in. You will find some organizations, and they are relevant for all organizations. Okay, so without any institutions called organizations, you are not able to run any economic transactions. Okay, so organization is at the heart of any economic transaction. Okay, so just individual entities do not form an economy in modern world. Okay, and why only modern world? Just go back to the history, and if in the very primitive society, if you look at when the human beings started living together, okay, And then immediately first thing they realize that they have a lot of advantage of cooperation. Okay. And when they do it, that hunters-gatherers society as the first kind of primitive society that we know, and then they were used to hunt down animal and then used to take food from a common kind of kitchen. So that was also an organization. Okay, so in terms of the history, the any economic organization which is running an economics and in any economic transactions is an organization. Okay, and obviously the complexity of that hunter-gatherer society was much less as compared to today when we look at the modern corporation or modern farm. Okay, so the first question is, what are the vertical boundaries of the organization? So that means in the process of sequence of activities, how much to undertake. That means whether to make or to buy in that production chain. Okay, so where to locate, essentially you have n number of activities in a final product. Okay, now when you are setting up an organization, you are deciding that how much you will vertically integrate. So how many activities you will be performing within your organization. Second question is, how are relations with suppliers, customers, and complementers organized? Okay, so you have organized something, you are producing some goods or services, which is to be given out to customers. Similarly, you are buying certain things from the suppliers. Okay, so when you are doing that, how that relations are to be organized. Okay, now there are different ways of organizing those relations. One is arm's length dealings or long-term relationship. Now the arm's length dealings is essentially you don't have any relation with the parties that you are doing the transaction. Okay, so in a market you are just buying something from the market, there is a supplier, but you are just doing at arm's length. So on the spot you are doing the transaction, you have no long-term relationship, you are not related to that supplier in any manner. You need certain things, you are buying from the market available, and any supplier will do. Similarly, you can also cultivate some relation, and that relationship could be that some of your suppliers are dedicated suppliers to you, and you can have a long-term relationship with them. Okay, now obviously you will see that even if without much more mathematical model, there are advantages and disadvantages of both types of dealings, whether that you are doing arm's length dealings or long-term relationship. Okay, now third point is, who owns which of the assets used in production. Okay, so now you are having an organization not only have people who will be participating in different production activities, but also they have to work on some machines or they have to use some assets. Okay, and those assets are to be part of the organization. Now the next question is, who should own those assets? Okay, now this is an important question, because depending on the ownership of the asset, the bargaining power of the people are decided, and it also gives you some kind of decision rights in terms of how the assets are to be allocated. So that's why this question number 3 is extremely important, that in the organizations, who should own those assets? Okay, how that should be organized. Question 4 is, how are the activities of the organization financed? Now this is extremely important. Okay, now I was referring to the terrorist organization just in the very first few minutes. Even those kind of organizations need financing. Okay, and if you just track down, you will find that they also there are funder who finance those organizations. Okay, think of political parties. They have to contest election, they need finance. Okay, so it's not that farm only they need finance. So the political parties need finance, terrorist organization needs finance, any organization that you can think of, they need finance. Okay, so the organization will undertake certain activities, but organization has to interact with the finance outside, because finance cannot be generated inside. when they cannot be. Obviously, if you are the rich man, you have come with that money and you don't rely on anybody, and then you start operation, and then you believe that you never need any money to interact with any other outsiders in terms of financing you. That's a separate issue. But for most organizations, finance are to be raised from the outside, and those outside can be formal or informal financial market. Okay. When I say formal or informal, both are important, because many of the kind of situations you will find that there are plenty of informal lending and borrowing that takes place. So they are equally important. Okay. So the organizations need finance. So organization and financial markets, they also interact closely. Okay. So it is important for the organization to decide how that financing should be done. How is governance defined and exercised both within the organization and by different parties with ownership or other claims? Okay, so this is basically the governance basically is how this particular organizations is hierarchically designed in terms of better functioning. Okay, so when I say this governance for better functioning, I do not mean that this governance is for maximizing profit, because remember, so far I have not mentioned what are the objectives of the organizations, and in the next class I will do talk about, but I have given you the examples of organizations where the profit is not the motive, both for terrorists as well as the political parties. The profit is not the motive or objective function of the organization. Okay, so that way our objective function of the organizations will be somewhat broad based. Okay, it's not solely the profit motive that is there. Okay, we'll try to do some models of non-profit organizations and some amount of theory of social enterprise, so which are not totally oriented towards profit maximize. Okay. Question number 6, what are the horizontal boundaries? So if you remember the first diagram, I have talked about it. So choosing the products or services, technologies, locations. So these essentially the expansion horizontally in terms of products, in terms of locations, in terms of other kind of things which are happening on a kind of horizontal platform. Okay, the vertical is along the vertical supply chain, horizontal is within the organization, what are the portfolio that you would like to maintain in terms of locations, products, the targeting the customers and all that. Now, question number 7, how are subunits within the organization defined, linked and coordinated? So that's an important issue for internal organization. How are resources of different types allocated? I have also talked about resource allocation in the first diagram. Where does decision making on different issues occur within the organization? So here it is important that somebody has to take decision. Now, when you are saying somebody, that somebody, does it necessarily means that the top man, or it means that anybody who is on the job should take the decision? Okay. So in other words, whether the decision making process should be at the top and then the decision will be communicated from top to down, or it will be a kind of somewhat flat organization in terms of decision making where everybody can take decisions at any particular contingency. What is the role of hierarchy? Interrelated questions. How many levels are there and what are the spans of control? Okay, so these spans of control is the individual reporting directly to a hierarchy superior and how they are being organized. What are the behavioral and performance effects of delegation? Okay, so the delegation is essentially when you are trying to delegate some decision-making power to some of the subordinates. Okay, and then what are the behavioral and performance effects? So here I was also talking about that if you just the same way pay for performance, here after this delegation, what kind of behavioral and performance effects will be there? Okay, So how that will be collectively taken, whether it will improve the performance or not. So those things are equally important within the internal organization of the firm. Is the organization fundamentally an expression of authority, or is it a nexus of contracts? Okay. So there are different views of organization. So one way some people, some literature has talked about that what is the need of an organization? Need of an organization is that you will have a boss. Okay. You will have an authority which will settle the issues downward. Okay, so any dispute that arises at the lower subordinate level, the boss higher up in that ladder will be able to have some authority over the two subordinates or whatever, and then they will be able to they sort out those problems. Okay. Similarly, another way to look at it is that there is no authority. We are in the organization, but we have some divisions, and the divisions are essentially bound together in terms of a nexus of contracts. Okay. So in other words, each divisions are assigned the task, they know their task, they do their job, and then connect, okay, with the other division. Okay. So the authority versus the nexus of contracts, these are different views of how an organization is to be thought of. How is power achieved and exercised, and what role does politics play within the organization? Power and politics is essence, is very important in organizations, and you are yet to join any organization as such, except your cooperative group of examination in the online system. Okay, you will realize when you actually enter into any organization how important is the power and politics within the organization. Okay, so those who are in the job or your parents, they will know the power and politics in the organization, and they have to be effectively handled. Okay, otherwise that will reduce the value of the organization. What information is collected on different matters, by whom, to whom is it communicated, and how is it used? So this entire information flow from top to bottom. Okay, so that information and communication has to be organized. Okay, so it is not about reporting that I am working or not working. Imagine that a particular uncertainty is resolved and you all of a sudden find that there is some problem in the desk where you manage. You have gathered a new information. What to do? First and foremost, are you allowed to gather the information? And if so, whom to communicate that information? That information is valuable because it finally determines the value of the organization, okay, or of a particular actions or decision that are undertaken. So that information is extremely valuable, based on which the next set of decisions are to be made. Okay, but then the entire information gathering activity as well as the communication process within the organization is extremely important. Now, those who have followed some of the last round of elections, you know that how the political parties, all the leaders, they tried to switch, and then they also done further switching. So all these things are essentially, there are a set of kind of information flows that were there, that happens everywhere, in all organizations. Okay, sometimes effectively handled, sometimes not. So measurement of performance is very important. How are people recruited, trained, assigned to jobs? How are they evaluated and rewarded? What effects do rewards have on behavior? So I have given you some amount of story regarding that. What are the roles of formal, legally enforceable contracts between organization versus relational contracts? Okay. So this part is extremely important. You will realize that we live in a society, those are mainly governed by certain acceptable practices, some norms, some cultural traditions, okay, some way of doing things, okay, some way of behaving with others, okay. So in other words, what we do or how we live or how we remain in an organization is not necessarily codified in terms of a contract, okay, in terms of a formal contract. So this certain activities can be tied to a formal contract which are enforceable in the court of law. Okay, that's number one. Second set of contracts can be simply on the basis of the relational contract. Okay, and what are those relational contracts? So essentially, these are long-term contracts. As you go along, you develop those relations in a manner that there is reputation concerns of the parties that if you breach the contract, it is not that court will penalize you. It is not that the society will boycott you, but you run the risk of reputations that you will lose with respect to the parties with whom you are actually in some kind of relation. Okay, so that is very important. So these are relational contracts. They are not at all formal contract in terms of enforceability in the court of law. Okay, so they are not formal as such, but they can be due to the repeated transactions with some parties. You can develop that relational contract. So, for example, between a buyer and seller of a farm. So imagine a farm who is regularly procuring input from an input supplier, and in that case, as soon as the quality of the inputs are good, so these transactions is very good, and both parties are happy, and this relationship continues. Now, any attempt, any interest of the input supplier to cheat on the quality will have the risk that this entire relation that is built over the years will fall flat. Okay, so it is not that the court will penalize the supplier, but the supplier is, in terms of relation, long-term relation, is bound with this party, so it would not like to deviate from that contractual terms, which is not yet not at all formal, but they will try to oblige to that contractual terms. Okay, and there are other issues like, imagine that there can be no contract at all. Okay, so for example, you are running an organization and there is no incentive, zero price. Okay, so sometimes it's not true now, but about, at least I know when I was a college student, that my teachers were used to complain that the salary of the teachers are really low, which was absolutely true. Okay, this is not to mean that we are all happy, because nobody is happy under the sun with respect to their salary. Everybody wants more. Okay, and more is taken to be better. I'm not talking in that terms, but I'm simply telling you that imagine a situation that where your payments is grossly inadequate, in a sense that it does not acknowledge your service. Okay, but even then you work hard. Why do you work hard? One possibility is that you have your own standard of morality and ethics. Okay, another possibility is that you may be thinking in terms of developing a reputation in the society, that you are a very good worker. Okay, so that tomorrow if you switch job, and if that information is well known to the new recruiter, then you will have a better bargain. Okay, so your current job is not adequately rewarding you, but even then you are actually working hard. Your current reward is not at all related to your performance, but you are still doing it because you have some expectations from the future. Okay, and also maybe you have some career concerns. So suppose I am managing a big farm, and tomorrow there is a chance that the farm will go bankrupt. Now, as soon as the farm will go bankrupt, I as a manager, the first thing that will happen, that the CEOs will lose their job. Okay, so in such a context, now if there is any possible choice available to the CEOs in terms of preventing that bankruptcy, even if that is personally costly for many of them, or it requires a lot of hard work, and although they are not paid for, okay, but they will still do it. For why? For what purpose? Purpose is that they have career concern. And what is that career concern? That I have managed a farm and which has which has gone to bankruptcy is not a good thing. Is not a good thing. So as a result, tomorrow my job prospect in the market will be so down. So if I have career concern, even if I am not paid in my current profession well, I will be working hard and develop my reputation so that maybe tomorrow you one of you go and set up a new university, and then you all of a sudden think that, okay, Uday sir was good, so why not hire him? So even if today I am not paid well, or if I am not at all paid, but tomorrow I can hope that information, that if I work hard, then the information goes out to the market, and tomorrow somebody who is going to hire me will hire me at a higher kind of reward. Okay, so my career concern will morally will actually incentivize me, which is not related to the standard incentive contract that you typically learn in all sorts of economic theory that you have done so far. Okay, so these are additional aspects of okay. So now the next question is, what norms exist regarding behavior towards others within the organization as well as outsiders, and how do these affect actual behavior and organizational performance? Okay, so if you just simply read it, you understand that there are some kind of organizational culture which are associated with how we behave in a particular organization. Okay, and that's how the organization is built. Okay, and continued. So norms are also equally important, which are not written anywhere, no formal contract, but it is a standard practice and convention people follow. Okay, so for example, if you look at the norms of Delhi School, I think I take a little bit of pride in that I do actually quote in variety of the other discussion and situation, that this school is such an organization that even if there is a strike, I mean that standard bond that is declared by different political parties. Okay, whether that is national, regional, or whatever. Okay, so that Bharat Bandh, that term, if you have come across from your school days, because those are earlier very fancy and all the parties were very much dependent on calling Bharat Bandh. Now Delhi School is such a place that until unless people are physically prevented on the road, all the faculty members will be coming to Delhi School and take classes. Okay, so even on the national bond, not the government official holidays, I am simply saying, suppose a political party tomorrow, due to some issues, declare that we are going to observe Bharat Bandh. Okay, so maybe against the petrol and diesel price hike. Okay, but had it been a physical classroom, you will see that your teachers will be there in the class. Maybe some of you would not be able to come to the class because of some vehicles are not plying on the road, or some other kind of disturbance on the path. But typically, even during all the political activities in terms of Bharat Bandh or whatever, Delhi School, at least in my last 15 years of experience, I have never missed a class because of this. Okay, and which I do take pride in, because ours is an organization which takes teaching quite seriously, and we do not skip our classes. And another partially kind of true and correct thing is that you will typically see in your regular physical classroom also, the teachers will appear on the horizon, I mean in the classroom, exactly at the time when the class is going to start. Okay, so these are some of the organizational practice we do have. But I also taught in my very early days in college, where it was difficult to drive out the teacher from the staff room, that boss, you have a class now, why don't you go to the class? Because that guy will be chatting in the staff room and debating on variety of things, but not attending his regular duty, which is to take classes for the undergraduate students. Okay. So these are part of the organizational ethics and norms. Okay. So now how are transgression against organizational rules and norms treated by different parties? Rules and norms if violated. So if you look at it, there may not be any formal punishment of any sort, but these norms and rules are kind of are there, and people do follow without actually thinking ever that if it is violated, what will actually happen, okay, or how the organization or the boss will actually treat it. So for example, if I do not go to the class on the day of a bond, whether my head will give me a show cause notice or not, okay, so that thing we never think when we do follow these kind of norms. Okay, so we are not actually formally tied towards any kind of obligation that we have to do it, but many of us follow norms and organizational rules. So there are other kind of aspects like corporate culture also shape some of the internal organizations, how they are handled. Okay, so internal grievances, okay, and then how they are handled to make a kind of conducive environment for all of the workers to work there. And all these things are also happened in an organizational setup. There you have to assign leadership role. Okay, and now leadership means what? What is the nature and role of leadership in an organization? That has to be properly dealt with. Okay, and finally, how do the answers of these questions depend on the markets in which the organization operates, the strategies it adopts to compete, and the social, legal, regulatory, and technological environment in which it is embedded, and how do all of these choices interact and affect performance. Okay, so these are the set of questions which Gibbons and Roberts, they actually collated after publishing their book in 2013, and they thought that the future of the organizational economics course would or should look into these questions and address them properly. Okay, so that is the idea of all these questions. So, and when in the next class I will be presenting you the structure of the readings and the topics that we will be able to do in this course. Okay, and then you will see that some of these questions we will be taking in some of the topics, but not all. So as I am repeatedly telling you that this is a growing field and active research area. So the people who are going and thinking of taking up the research as their career, they will find that wherever they are going, whatever they are doing, they will find that this kind of course on organization will pave the way or provide the foundation for this kind of whatever research that you want to do. Okay, because this course will teach you essentially that all economic transactions happen under the aegis and constellation of organizations. Okay, so it is not that transactions happen in isolation or transactions happen between individuals. Transactions happen mostly between organizations and within organizations. Okay, so that way organizations is so pervasive in terms of understanding different component of economic problems. Okay, so different fields of economics. So those who have so Paul Anthras I have talked about. So he has used actually this organizational economics, the global production, global sourcing, all these papers that for which he is very famous, and you never know. And some of us, those who are aware of this trade related field, also we believe that someday Paul Anthras will get Nobel Prize, maybe along with Melitz, the other guy. Okay, so they have actually looked into the behavior of firms and the organizations in a broader context. And nowadays, none of the organizations are not only insulated from others, but they are globally connected. So if you look at, if you are aware of these winter school lectures, and many of the, I think the lectures are also available on the web page, some YouTube channel. So Paul Anthers was talking about how the global production is organized by taking inputs from many different countries, okay, and then finally producing it in one place, okay, but sourcing it from many different countries and in many different network forms, okay. So his thing was that in the value chain, so one was that snake type of network where it is basically going from one country, the product is moving from one country to another, to another, to another, and it's like a snake moving along the globe. And then there is the spider kind of network where actually the different places are connecting together to a hub and providing the necessary inputs, and then that's the spider kind of network that happens for all production related activities. And remember that for all production related activities, organizations are involved. And then he also talked about that new kind of, what is his own thing called Sniker, or I think Sniker now. So anyway, so these are just aside about how trade theory has actually looked into the theory of farm or the issues related to the organizational economics very seriously in terms of addressing the recent trends in global productions, global value chain, and how the global production and distribution is organized all across the globe, okay. Similarly, all the foreign investments that are going to different countries, how that are also partially related to the entire production flows that are being organized for different goods and services, okay. So any questions?
Sir, may I, Professor Sanoy?
Yeah, please. Why don't you, I'm just stopping my screen share, and also why don't you put your videos on, okay, if when you are asking questions.
Oh, okay, sir. So I had a small question. So since there are not, so Divyesh here. Since there is not any particular reference book, since it's a very active research area, as you mentioned, will we be going through the course heavily through research papers, or will we still have substantial readings?
Yeah, so most part of it will be journal articles, okay, and I am also in the process of identifying the correct kind of articles, which are, as I told you, there are plenty of articles in QJE, AER, and all these top journals, okay. But if I try to do one article, that will take 3 to 4 classes per article, but then we will not be able to do anything substantive, okay. So I am in the process of identifying whatever is possible to present in the class. So I am looking for good papers or their presentations in a simpler way, okay. So maybe with the help of some examples rather than going through the entire details of the mathematics, but still driving home the actual points for which the paper is written. Now, remember one thing, when the papers are written, they are written with some purpose. Now, purpose is not only that they are contributing a valuable idea to the world of economics, but they need to be also, they need to be published in good places. And for publishing in good places, it has to be sophisticated enough. So much of the sophisticated mathematical formulations are because of the objective of publishing is in top quality journals, okay. So even without those complex mathematics and the sophistication, the basic point, basic idea can still be carried forward, can be delivered, okay, with the help of simple structure and example. So I will be looking for resources and materials where I will be able to find that kind of presentation possible, okay. So I'm in the process of organizing, so to say, in the economics of organization, the reading list, okay. So that's what I'm doing right now. In the next class, I will be giving you some bit of readings for, and then as I go along, I will be changing them depending on whichever is doable in the class, whichever is not doable in the class, and that's how it will be going. Okay. But unfortunately, there's no textbook. And this is going to happen for any new field that you venture into at any point of your life, because textbooks are written only when the field is reasonably developed. Okay. And what I am understanding from here is that the way this particular field is expanding, you need someone like Tirol, but Tirol is now old and he has got the Nobel Prize. He has other books already written, and all the books are like classic. IO books of 1987 is a path-breaking work, because that has actually created the field of IO. Okay. And that so nicely written, all the paper summaries in such a simplified structure, and with the help of simple examples that they have done, that he has done. So that was fascinating. So what you need in this particular course, or for this particular course, is someone like Tirol. I'm not saying Tirol has to do, but someone like Tirol who should do and write a book, textbook on organizational economics. Okay. So that would be fantastic. So that would be then the parallel of Tirol's IO book. Okay. And we need that kind of book. It is not a very kind of the standard tools and techniques are of not much kind of value for this kind of book. What is important is to present things in a simplified manner. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha, sir.
So
Yeah.
So will the internal assessment comprise of us writing a term paper, or will it be an exam?
So, we are living in an uncertain world, in a sense that we don't know how the university is thinking in terms of examination. Okay. So if there is final examination, then there is a route that there will be final examination that is known. So we have 70 marks there, and we are not going to touch that. But out of 30 marks, the internal, now typically for optional courses, I typically take one internal assessment. Okay. But now we have to see how the situation unfolds. In a sense, if we see or feel at any point of time that interim might be washed out, then we have to take 2 midterms. Okay. And in case that possibility is there, I'm not saying that's a certain possibility, with some probability interim is washed out. So these 2 midterms will be taken, and then these 2 midterms will be separately submitted as part of that 50 marks evaluation. Or if we still have interim, then we will basically give the average of the 2 midterms. Okay, that's one. Now the question is, midterm means what? Is it an examination or term paper? Now that will depend on the number of students. Now, if the number of students are below certain level, there's a, say maybe 30, below 30, then we will have term paper as well as presentation. Now that's the best way to go into this course, because you actually learn a lot when you read a paper, a field, and couple of papers, and then you present them. All the people, the present kind of the other students as well as me, will be asking you questions and all. So that will clarify things and your understanding, and that will give you a good foundation in terms of what is there in the mind. It's like acting on behalf of the author. Okay. So nowadays, lots of real life movies are there online. So it is like basically acting like an author and then presenting that paper. So that will give you a good kind of exposure in terms of how the research is done, how the people think about problems and all that. Okay. Now that's my target, that there will be term paper written as well as presentation. Now, if at any stage, again, I have to look into the number of registered students and all, at any stage, I feel that only term paper will not be possible given the large number of enrollment, then I will have to take the midterm examination. And even then, I will keep the window open for some students. Those will self-select and make presentation. So maybe 10 papers will be presented. Okay. And those 10 papers, so 10 students depending on the fast come fast serve basis, I will share some Google Sheet and they will be signing up for presentation. Okay. And for them, the mode of evaluation will be decided later. Okay. So at the time I will tell you. Okay. When I'm actually giving you the sign up sheet. Okay, so these are the basically ways to move forward from here because we do not have clear picture about how things will go. First is enrollment is not clear to me, which is a big handicap at the moment, and I don't know how long it will continue like this, or we'll be able to get the final list of students. And then second is the pandemic, how it will unfold. Oh, there is another issue. So in the midterm, apart from the assessment and presentation, whatever the form it takes, I also regularly take class attendance. Okay. So I basically ask students to put their name in the chat box. Okay. And I'm very selective about attendance. So I will take attendance only on the days when I have less number of students. Okay. And I will, and at that time, either I will use the screenshot method or I will ask you to put your name in terms of in the chat box. And then those attendance also carry some kind of marks, okay, for the internal. So maybe five marks or 10 marks will be allocated for the attendance. So as a result, if you maximize your attendance, you get close to that highest marks, okay? So all these are different ways to actually get an effective class. Any question, anything else?
Yeah, so just one doubt. Is the 803 course, like the economic theory of the firm, not being like offered this semester?
Timetable still has it, right?
Yes, sir.
So the teacher is also present in this meeting. So ask her.
Oh.
This there.
Yes, sir, I'm here. Hello,
Why don't
everyone.
you make your announcement?
Yes, so first of all, 803 is topics in industrial organization. There has been a mismatch between the course code and the course name in the timetable. And the course will not be offered in this semester. It will be offered in the next semester.
Any other question?
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just closing the session for today.
Sir, so just
Yeah,
a small
sorry,
query.
sorry.
Fine.
Huh,
So
tell me.
will we have a Piazza platform for this course? I mean, the details have not reached us with regards to that. So I thought.
So since people have started leaving, so I will address this question tomorrow. Is that fine?
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.